Hi everyone. I'm going to talk a little bit about interviewing questions and techniques today. So I'm going to start by saying that whenever possible, always use panel interviews. They're always a good idea, especially when the panel isn't a group of groupthink people, everybody who thinks the same way, acts the same way, has the same thought processes, etc. Having a diverse panel always nets some different perspectives and results on an interview than it does otherwise. In fact, it's great to have panel interviews with people that aren't even from the area the person would be working. So, for example, if you're hiring a production employee, bring somebody in from marketing, bring somebody in from finance. They'll give a different perspective and they'll ask different questions than you might have thought of otherwise. Certainly different questions than a production supervisor might ask. And they might have a different perception about the culture that that person brings than a production person may. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time in this talking about the questions you shouldn't ask. Hopefully all of you have a good grasp on that. If you don't, do a quick search on Google and you'll find about 1,000,000 things on that says, hey, don't ask these questions. There's also a lot of government publications, a number of different things, but there's the obvious questions you simply don't ask. So I don't want to take a bunch of time doing that. So I'm going to jump off here and say one of my rules in interviewing is I never ask questions that there's only one answer for. Okay, what are questions there only one answer for? When you ask a question like, hey, are you a hard worker? Do you care about other people? Are you reliable? When you ask questions like that, whether the person actually believes in their answer or not, there's only one obvious answer. They're going to tell you, well, of course I'm a hard worker. Yes, I love other people, and I'm incredibly reliable, even if they're not. So there's no point in asking questions. There's just only one potential answer that someone can give. It's a waste of your time and a waste of theirs, quite honestly. So most interviews should include a combination of things to try to ferret out what kind of technical skills they might have, as well as what type of culture do they bring to the position. Maybe even some education or certifications that they might have. And I'm going to jump back off and talk about transferable skills here again. Or even think about it from an academic perspective. I ask a direct question and I say, hey, I'm hiring somebody for an HR position. I said, do you have a PHR certification? And the answer is no, I don't have a PHR certification. But what I may have missed is maybe they have a SHRM SCP certification. And really all I wanted to know is if they had some additional certifications in the HR field. So a better way to phrase that question would have been, hey, do you have any particular certifications or education that supports your HR work? So how you phrase that question, the less specific you can be, but still get the answer, the better off you'll be. Same thing on the technical side. If I asked all of the people, for those of you who watched my previous video with the client that did some DirecTV satellite installations, if I asked them, hey, have you ever repaired appliances? Almost all of them are going to say no. So if I immediately dismissed them and said, hey, well, this person isn't qualified, they've never repaired appliances, I would have missed out on a large workforce that were potentially very talented. I'm going to stretch it a little further. When you think about light assembly operations, if you think about things where it requires people to run some fairly simple, not sophisticated equipment, you might think, and I'm going to compare that to fast food, you might think, well, what does fast food have to do with those things? Well, think about it. If you're working in a fast food restaurant, you probably know how to work some of the appliances. You probably know how to work the fry basket. You probably know how to assemble a sandwich, a burger, a number of different things. So there's similar thought processes. So when you think about, well, what's a transferable skill? Well, there's a perfect example. So now, certainly there are technical skills that require something more advanced, but think about it from that perspective when you're thinking about what are transferable skills. Talk about culture. There's some cultural questions, but if you ask somebody a question, hey, what kind of culture do you like in a company? They're often going to look at you like you just asked them, where does a white go when snow melts? They don't know how to articulate an answer around that. But change that up. If you have a company that's really centered around a safety-driven culture, you might ask the question that says, hey, tell me about a time when you were working in an environment that you considered unsafe, or maybe an environment that you considered was very safety-focused. How did you interact with that? In the non-safe environment, what was your approach to it? What did you think about it? In the safe environment, how did you contribute to it? How did you make sure it stayed that way? What are some of the things that you did with that? So ask situational questions that gives you a feel for, hey, are they very safety conscious? Are they very safety oriented? So I'm going to wrap this up. I don't spend too much more time, but I'm just going to emphasize, when possible, interview people with a diverse group, diverse panel. And don't ask specific questions. Make your questions more broad and general. Think about transferable skills. Think about how to make cultural questions more relative to them and what they've experienced in their lives. As always, any thoughts, questions, feedback, happy to hear it. Please feel free to reach out to me anytime.